Maybe a good starting point is just why do we use, like why are they helpful, stages of recovery? I don't know if you want to say something about how we use that in terms of road mapping and getting a sense of where someone is.
Sure, okay. So stages of recovery are really helpful for us as practitioners because they give us a sort of ground map, if you like, of the journey of recovery from stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And everybody's journey is different, obviously, but it helps us to be able to pinpoint where someone is, and that helps guide the kind of treatment that we use with people because it's always stage appropriate.
Yes, and I think that can be one of the great frustrations for someone, that especially, and we'll come through the stages in a moment, but if, for example, someone's been finding that doing loads of resting has really been helping them, and they're feeling, they're definitely improving, and then suddenly it's almost like they feel worse for resting, and it's like you think, but that was helping me.
Yeah, sure.
Or certain approaches tend to emphasize the importance of certain bits, and so we go down that, and one of the things I always think is graded exercise at stage 3. Great.
Yeah.
Stage 1.
No.
Really bad. So people can look at the handout, but I don't know if we can maybe just chat through a little bit about the different stages. So
sure.
Let's start stage 1. I don't know if you want to say.
Stage 1. Okay. So stage 1 is really crash. This is where your body's forced you to lie down, to rest. Various different body systems, so the immune system, sometimes the digestive system, have gone into dysfunction and sometimes just given up, really. I know that's what my immune system did when I was ill.
Like.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's in a way the body forces you to stop and to rest by not giving you any energy whatsoever. So your physical, mental and emotional capacity are really limited at stage 1. Yeah. Housebound, perhaps even bedbound at that stage.
Yeah. And we should also say that this is a map that is useful through the kind of overall recovery, but also if we have a mini relapse, we cycle back through these stages.
Absolutely, yeah, that's really important. So when we're working with people, we're teaching them different tools for recovery, which are appropriate for different stages, if you like. And then you've got the whole toolkit. So if you do have a bit of a dip, you're in stage 2, you have a bit of a dip to stage 1, it isn't as if you've gone backwards, in fact. You kind of come into a bit of a lay-by. If you're on a road, it would be like hitting a pothole, coming into a lay-by, and then you might need to go back.
That's really good.
I love that. Love that analogy. So yeah, you've hit your pothole, you're in your lay-by, and then you might need to begin to use some of those stage 1 appropriate tools and techniques in order to help you to get back out onto the road in just the same place as you came off. Yeah. But you've done the work you needed to do in that lay-by.
Yeah. So stage 1 is kind of the crash stage. We'll come back in a little bit and we'll talk more about what helps kind of move through the stages. But stage 1 is the kind of crash stage. So that's the kind of, as you say, completely burnt out, exhausted, and often sleep a lot. Stage 1, it's like sleep's almost easy because you're so tired you can't not sleep. For most people, not everyone, but most people in stage 1. Stage 2.
Tired and wired. So it says it as it is. And every person that I work with, they come up with those words themselves. I don't need to say them. It's just how it feels. In stage 2, often the body is exhausted still. The mind is really busy. There's a lot of stress patterns going on, can be quite a lot of anxiety. And it can be really difficult to calm down, really difficult to ground yourself, and actually really hard to get to sleep. So where in stage 1, you're sleeping a lot, and that's easy to do. Stage 2, it can be really hard to come down through the gears to get to sleep.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the great frustrations, because often people will say, I'm getting worse because I can't sleep. And and also I feel more anxiety. And it feels like we're regressing, but actually what I call it is a perverse sign of progress, because it's like actually things are moving forwards. And my sense of why that is actually energy's coming back, but it's going to the nervous system. It's kind of going back to where we left off, which we were kind of really wild before we crashed. So it goes back into fueling that.
It's fueling the maladaptive stress response, isn't it? That's where it's going into. So it's not real energy, or we don't experience it as real energy. But you have to have energy to maintain the tired and wired state.
Right, totally.
So you have made progress.
It doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel great, but in a way it's kind of reframing that to say, actually, this is good. Your body's getting some energy back.
We've now got to do something else with it, which we'll come back to in a minute. So then stage 3, what can we say about, what do we call it, and what can we say about it?
Reintegration. So stage 3 is reintegration. This is where you have a fairly stable baseline, and you are beginning to really trust your body a lot more. So that mind-body relationship is kind of growing, getting stronger again. You're able to begin to do things back in the world again. So whether that be going back to work, whether that be socializing, doing household chores, you've got more energy to be able to do that.
And it may not be doing it at a full level, and that can also be part of the challenge at stage 3, that it's, I think we're starting to do things again, and so the danger can be all the old patterns start to come back in, I guess, because it's like suddenly I can do stuff, oh great, I'm recovered now, and then the tendency is to kind of take on things we shouldn't be taking on, or how to say, like at stage 1 you don't really have to learn how to say no because your body says no for you. It's like at stage 3, actually you need more strategies to be able to kind of navigate some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, where in stage 2 we're really working to calm the nervous system, to be much more grounded, to be doing everything in a calm, healing state. That can be quite easy in stage 2 because you're generally, you're not in the world, you're doing this at home. In stage 3, reintegration, these patterns keep popping back up. Right. So patterns that you may have worked on to a certain extent at stage 2, you then need to work on again because the environments that you're putting yourself into, now you've got the energy to do that a bit more, will be making those patterns pop up. Totally.
And I think that's also where this model is so helpful because it's like when you can go, hang on a second, again, it's not that I'm getting worse at using the tools, it's not the tools that stopped working, it's that I need a different understanding of how to use the tools at this stage. So let's go back a bit through each of the stages and just talk a bit about what's important. Like kind of what I think the way we put it in the handout was the characteristics we just covered, and I think it's the key priorities, kind of each stage. So at stage 1, what's important, because the key priorities obviously are what help us move out of that stage. So what are the key priorities at stage 1 that will help us hopefully in time progress?
Sure, okay, so stage 1 is about rest. It's about getting quality rest. It's about sleep. It's about good quality nutrition, good quality hydration. You're very physically, mentally and emotionally limited, but very gentle movement of the limbs, whether that's in bed or on the sofa, can be helpful too. Listening to relaxation CDs can be great.
Is it worth saying as well that one of the things in the research at MECFS is one of the best predictors of long-term prognosis is early diagnosis, and often the reason I think that is that the sooner we get permission to stop, the less deep stage 1 goes. And it's like the longer we take to acknowledge we're in stage 1, actually the deeper it gets until we acknowledge it.
Absolutely.
I think that can be why it's so really important. It's like if a friend of mine is showing signs of MECFS, I'm always kind of like, stop now. It's like, don't push it deeper. And be overcautious at that point almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Having a baseline of activity that's appropriate for that stage is really important to find so that you're not pushing. And often when we haven't accepted something, we will fight against it and we'll keep pushing to try to do things. And as you say, that just pushes things deeper. So in stage 1, it can also be really helpful to get a really clear understanding of what's going on in the body and why it's happening, because that can help you to accept it and to feel a bit more in control with it, really.
Yeah, and I think that's also one of the challenges, that if our activity was there before, our energy was there and our activity was there, we always now what we can actually do is down here. Even if what we're doing is up here, we've dropped our activity loads, but if it's still more, if we've got an achiever pattern, it's still more than what we can do, it's still not low enough. And it's getting that activity level below the actual energy we've got. So we're building up those reserves again to start making progress. I think that's often really hard for people because they're kind of they're saying, well, I'm already doing so much less. I'm resting all the time.
And sometimes it's about having a long-term view picture in your head rather than short-term. So short-term, you may need to decrease and do less than you're doing in order that you can start to bank that energy to over time with kind of appropriate pacing be able to do more.
Okay, great. So that's stage 1. And if someone gets that pacing right, gets the quality rest in time, they can start to celebrate because they start to get more anxiety and they struggle sleeping. So in terms of stage 2, we said it was tired and wired. And you mentioned the maladaptive stress response. I don't know if you want to
Yeah.
just give a slight bit of context of what we mean by that. And
Yeah, sure. So that's where the body, the way I describe it to people, quite a simplistic way really, is the body gets itself stuck into a much higher level of stress than it needs to, and that limits your capacity, because when the body does that, it's using up a lot of its resources that it needs for energy in stress.
yes.
And it's stuck, and it's normalised up there. So stage 2 is all about reducing the level of maladaptive stress response in the body and mind.
Yes, totally. What are some of the ways that we can do that?
Okay, so the way that we work on this in the psychology department is firstly to give people a really clear understanding of what's going on, and that in itself can cause a drop in the maladaptive stress response.
Totally.
Because finally you've got answers to some of those questions. The next thing that we do is work with kind of cognition, so somebody's thinking, because we know, and science is proving all the time, that the way that we think has a very real physiological impact on our bodies. So we work with people to start to become aware of their patterns of thinking, and just to check out various things. Is it helpful, is our kind of favourite question. Is the way you're thinking helpful or unhelpful? And then we teach them a tool to help them to bring that into a more helpful kind of pattern, really, because that too, it sends a different message to the body, and that can help to reduce the maladaptive stress.
Yeah, there's something about, what you're saying. I think it's why the first part of the 90-day program, the first part of telephone treatment program, and the psychology side, and obviously we haven't really said this is a kind of psychology-based model, so to get that kind of context. But it's the reason why that explanation is actually really important. It's not just so we can do what we want to do. It does have that calming effect, because that, what's wrong with me? Why is it wrong with me? Will I ever get better? Will this change? We just start to calm some of that. So at Tired and Wired as well, can you say something about activity levels? Because that can also be quite tricky at Tired and Wired, that often with that kind of up and down of the nervous system, what we can and can't do kind of ends up going up and down, and that can get quite confusing, I think, sometimes.
Sure. Well, one of the key things for people to learn about pacing in stage 2 is that it's not what you're doing, it's the state that you're doing it in. And so actually the priority is to work so that the system gets itself into a calm, healing state.
Yes.
From there, you can then really hear what your body's saying. And that's something else we really work with, is helping people to re-establish that relationship, mind-body relationship. So you can actually tune into the body and get a handle on what real energy is there. And that can help to inform your pacing. It's important, though, to not get carried away. So the achievers out there, I know this is something I definitely did when I was in stage 2. Important not to go beyond. In fact, it's important to do less than, because you've got to be building a kind of buffer of energy, building a bank to help you to move forward.
And that's really challenging, especially when we've been lingering and loitering, it can feel like in stage 1 sometimes, and suddenly energy comes back. And the kind of instinct is to try and do all the things we haven't been able to, all the things we've been put off, all the things we want to do.
See all those people we haven't seen.
And that's I think takes quite a lot of discipline. And I think my observation is that one of the tricks to move through stage 2 more effortlessly is to actually be more disciplined around saying no and not, getting carried away.
Yeah, and that's tough.
Yeah.
For achievers, helpers.
Sure.
Hard.
Most of us.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about stage 3.
Okay.
So someone comes through stage 2, and as they come through stage 2, I guess one of the characteristics is the anxiety tends to calm a little bit. But as you were saying, often it calms in isolation.
Yes.
So it's like we can be calmer if we shut the whole world out. And I think, some people, they kind of think that's recovery. And I think it's one of the reasons why sometimes we have people come to the clinic that will say, I'm almost recovered. And actually what they've got to is they can be calm by themselves. When they go into the world, all the old stuff kicks off. Yeah. So can you say a bit about stage 3 and the reintegration stage? What helps us move through that, in terms of that, especially let's maybe start with that anxiety piece of being in the world. And dealing with all the stuff.
Yeah,
one of a more technical term.
Yeah, okay. Well, stage 3 is often where something that we call environmental tiredness can be a big issue, and that's where there's something in the environment. Either you're doing the same thing for too long, or something in the environment is kind of wearing you out. And as you said, it's easy in isolation. Well, Not
easier.
Easier.
For some people.
Yeah.
Some people it's not. This is not always an issue, but I think for quite a few people it is. Yeah.
The way I describe it, when you're in stage 3 and you're beginning to go back into work or back into socialising, is it's a bit like being up against an opponent in some kind of martial art. So when you're in stage 2, you're practicing your moves, so you're using your tools.
I like your analogy. That's really
Thank
good.
you. And it's not difficult. And yes,
Yeah.
you have to do it a lot to get it right and to really ground it into the body. Stage 3, you've actually got an opponent.
They hit you back.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're kind of having to maneuver with what's going on in your environment. Notice when someone is pulling you into a helper pattern, for example, and take your use of your tools up to the next level to be able to be okay with saying no, or to be able to be okay with not driving yourself into the ground to be the best teacher in the world. Or
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And how about also with the pacing piece of stage 3? Because I think part of what we've kind of said facilitates this move from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 is actually being really careful with the pacing.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit like, the studies they've done with fish in fish tanks. They put a glass thing in it.
Yes.
The fish learns. There's a kind of glass ceiling or glass kind of wall. So it's also the point in stage 3 that actually we have to start really bouncing the boundaries and challenging that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, in terms of bouncing the boundaries, in stage 2, you've created more of a baseline, which has enabled you to grow the energy. In stage 3, obviously, we don't want you somebody to go from a certain amount of activity to suddenly doing a lot more. So it is about gently increasing that. But the key thing is about finding the balance between doing too much and not doing enough.
Right.
Because not doing enough can be as much of a problem.
Because it actually generates symptoms sometimes, yeah.
Totally.
Environmental tiredness was one context that you gave for it, yeah.
Yeah, so not doing enough can be as much of a problem as doing too much to a certain extent. So it's about part of the work we're doing while we're navigating people through stage 3 is helping them to find that balance. Not booming and busting, not overdoing it, and just gently increasing what they can do one ring at a time.
Yeah. And I think we should do a separate session on Secrets Live at some point, if someone on the site team, around bouncing the boundaries, because obviously a lot more we could say about that as well. I think also it's probably worth saying, in my observation as well, part of what facilitates kind of lasting recovery is healthy navigation through these different stages. Because if we skip a stage or we don't understand the detail of those transitions, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a kind of thing where, especially if we don't fully deal with the reintegration stage, it's like, or we haven't got the tools for the tired and wired stage, or we don't know how to rest when we need to. It's like, it's kind of a building a skyscraper with a dodgy foundation kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Great. Brilliant. Well, thank you, Jess.
You're welcome.
So people have got the handout, and I think hopefully that's been really helpful. It's great to have your contribution, so thank you. Great.
No worries.
And thank you everyone for watching. I'm assuming we still haven't had the other camera, so if you've seen it cutting between a camera on me and the wide shot, it's not because I'm narcissistic and have to have my own camera. It is genuinely because we've had a problem with this camera. But thank you to Jess, and thank you to Sue. And the next Youth Recovery Live is the 13th of October, so it's just over a month. It's another Monday, and we'll let you know through the newsletter soon who our guests are going to be there. Also, if you want to get more of a sense of Secret Recovery generally, do go to secretrecovery.com. There's over 100 hours of videos, audio interviews, recovery stories, sessions with the clinic team on there, so it's a great resource to support your own recovery. Also, please do go to freedomfromme.co.uk. That's the clinic's main website where you can order an information pack and also a free 15-minute chat. So thank you for watching, and we look forward to talking to you again on the 13th of October. Bye-bye.